obviously went through other people to interview, I'm guessing. Why these particular, and why black and white?
Well, I love black and white. I think it's a great style. In fact, most of the stuff I do, I have in black and white. But also, if you look at it, we're looking at the world as black and white. So I wanted to show even at the end that we're trying to come out of it and see a little bit of color from doing it. So that was one of the reasons why I did it. I picked the people in the film because they're really well known. One of them's in the film. This is Chad, if you guys recognize him. He has a little bit longer hair. So, but these are really educated people that are in the film. I really respect and admire them. They had a lot of really great stuff to say. And I think in the world of alternative facts and news and all that stuff, we really need to listen to science and educators and what they actually have to say. And that's why I picked these people to actually do it. So.
Great job.
Thank you. Thanks.
Go ahead.
I liked what they said about critical thinking, and I think starting to teach that at a young age, because there's so much manipulation that goes on that can turn people's thought if they're not able to think clearly like that.
Yes.
So I think that was a great point that was brought up.
Thank you, and I'm a big proponent of that. I'm a big proponent of science and education for that exact reason. I started this film 3 years ago. I didn't know we'd be in the political climate we are now. But it's definitely needs to be told that when we're getting information, like she was saying, to update that information. That's why I put the Donald Trump quote in there, because if you're not updating the information to make decisions, I mean, and it's not just political or religious, I mean, decisions on that kind of house you're gonna have, the kind of partner you're gonna have, you know, I mean, there's a lot of decisions we have to critically think about, so you have to have that process, and I don't know about you, I wasn't taught that in school. You know, I wasn't taught a lot of these things in school, and I think we need to be educated more to do that. Do you guys want to speak a little bit about that? I'd like to introduce my wife and Chad too. My wife is the producer, and I'd love to bring Chad on, but what's your guys' thought about critical thinking?
Well, obviously I share the same type of thinking that you do. That's why we made the movie. But in regards to starting young, that's something that I tried to instill in my daughter and in my son from a very young age. I always try to get them to think about what they're doing before they do it. Even now, my daughter is a super stubborn 17-year-old, and that is the one thing that she and I will go round and round and round about is stop and think about what you're going to do before you do it, before you make that decision, and try to gather as much information. And if we can get our schools to do that, our educators to do that, I think that, you know, we would see a whole new generation of thinkers. What do you think, Chad? Being an educator yourself.
Critical thinking is good. I tend to focus on, excuse me, on the evidence idea, and I focus on this natural versus supernatural explanations of things. The problem with supernatural explanations, by definition, is they do not admit to evidence. And if your belief system is predicated on something for which you could neither have evidence in favor nor against, then you have your belief system is one that can't really be evaluated. I think when we restrict our discussions, our beliefs to physical understandings, even if we don't, you know, of course, as we mentioned, it can be unsettling sometimes to not know the answer, and that's what you have to do sometimes when you're insisting on the natural explanation. Sometimes you have to suspend your anticipation. But I like to think of it this way. If you think of your kind of typical Christian, your typical Muslim, and let's say they've got to resolve this argument, you know, and as can happen in modern environments, maybe we're going to die if we don't come to an agreement on this. Well, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
These are supernatural belief systems. I can't provide you any evidence that my Christian or my Muslim beliefs are wrong or right. You can't do the same for me from the other side. Therefore, if the two of us holding our beliefs means we're going to be in conflict, then we're just stuck in conflict with no potential for resolution. So I guess that's what I'd say. Critical thinking mostly just needs to be dependent on evidence.
Yeah, agreed.
100%.
I thought what you did, showing that antiquated beliefs that we have and we're still hanging on to is what the struggle is right now with the scientific and the people that want to move forward and have different belief systems. I thought you did an excellent job of showing that.
Thank you. That's the reason why I make films. You know, I tell people all the time, we used to have a country where we believed that we could put a man on the moon. Like I wasn't alive in that generation. That was a different generation beyond me. I didn't get to have the fortune to be in that kind of country. And I feel like we made so much progress with technology, with the internet. I mean, there's, you know, I'm not the smartest person in the world. I didn't even graduate high school. I got a diploma later. But guess what? The internet has taught me so much, and I learned so much. I can pull up any college, university, and learn something. So why are we not using these tools in our political systems and even our belief systems to make the world a better place? I want to know that when I go to a doctor, the doctor can evaluate me correctly, you know, and to be healthy. So when Peter Boghossian mentions being prosperous, that's really what I'm fighting for. And I really think we have the technology and the ability to do it. It's just, do we have the mindset and the well-being to do it? And looking at the political climate, I'm sorry, I don't feel that. So that's why I make films. So thank you very much.
Yeah, the belief systems is what need to shift.
Yes, and when we do, that's when we make change, right? We believed that the world was flat, right? We had so many, we used to believe that if we did a rain dance, the rains would come. But every time we questioned, every time we went out into reality and we said, how does this really work? We've benefited from it, and we never went back to magical thinking. So I'm not just trying to pick on spirituality, religion, and conspiracy. I'm trying to say, this is how we've made progress. This is how we as human beings have made progress. And if we're not going to take that mindset and take it seriously, I don't know. And with problems like global warming and people saying, well, there's no, you know, not paying attention to the evidence. Well, these are problems we have to solve. So, yeah. I don't know where to start. Let me start over here. Go ahead.
I really appreciate the timing and the subject matter of your film.
Thank you.
I think some of the comments about how to make it better are appropriate on the scoring.
Cool.
I would really enjoy and learn something from the sections on how to engage others.
Mm-hmm.
And if you could possibly expand that, I think would be a very positive thing to do.
Sure.
And how to engage the science with the philosophy of existentialism and how ambiguous life can be with in a path to go forward without becoming nihilistic. So,
Yeah, I think it comes down to what Peter Boghossian said. It's about creating value and expressing what the value and the benefit is to people to doing this. Do you have any thoughts? I know you're an educator about this. Like, what's a way that we can kind of get out there and communicate this message?
Well, lots of ways. I tend to think leading by doing type of thing. I mean, it sounds, but I think the truth is, you mentioned the idea that there never seems to be a case, I think this is what you're saying, where science has approached a problem and then we said, you know what, actually science can't handle, let's just go back to the supernatural explanation. So my general belief today is, as a psychologist, I'm very interested in the essence of who we are. And of course, many of us, maybe most of us, think of that as a soul. And to date, perhaps that's the best physical explanation we've got. Non-physical explanation we got. But the physical one, the scientific explanation, that's my job, it's the job of all other folks in my realm to figure out what the fundamental nature of who we are is, what makes us be the way we want to be, what makes us be the way we don't want to be, et cetera. And life will just get better. Quality of life will simply increase the better we have a scientific understanding of what makes us who we are. And so, in a sense, it's not exactly the right answer, because it's kind of the lazy answer. It's just kind of like, well, let science keep going, and things are going to get better, and everybody's just going to see, well, hey, we can give up this old belief system. In terms of being more proactive, though, I really like the way Michael Shermer put it. I mean, it's what I've discovered in my own interactions is you just get a lot better. It's not just kind of letting the other person. It's actually hearing what they say. I mean, the more you can understand why that person believes what they believe, the more you can, I don't want to say, it's not a patronizing kind of thing for me. It's not that I can fix you type of thing. It's just that more that the two of you, I guess, can come to some consensus on the best explanation that we have.
Yeah, and I agree, and I tell people all the time, try to listen to a different point of view than your own. I always am watching documentaries or reading things that are different than my point of view, because I don't know if I'm always right about everything. And the only way we're going to do is have a conversation. And I'm very outspoken. Most people that know me, I'll speak my mind exactly how I feel. But you've got to be civilized in some conversations and be engaged with people. I know a lot of people who think different than I do, and I try to listen. Where is that person coming from? Psychology is what I love. Really, most of my films are psychology. My wife's a psychology major. I have psychologists in the film. But the psychology of why we think the way we think. And I think that helps you in life, right? It helps you understand your partner and your kids and your, whatever it is you're doing. And the more we understand our mind and the reasons why we do what we do and think the way we do, we have a better understanding. And I think it comes down to even finding out a little bit more about empathy, which I know you're writing a new book about. You want to talk a little bit about that, about empathy? When it comes to the importance of how we understand that?
Yeah, absolutely. So a colleague might have an edited book coming out on neuroscience of empathy and compassion, is what you're referring to. And I suppose it's, to hammer all the world's a nail, maybe that's why I'm focusing so much on trying to understand people on the other side of the argument, because I study empathy. But I really do think it's essential. So I mentioned in the film the sun god Ra, and I remember as a teenager, I remember I was actually born again Christian. And I was in world history class. I said, well, why do these people, how could they possibly believe, I know with the one true God, how could they possibly, the sun is a God? And I started thinking, I could actually really easily see how they believed the sun was a God. It was the best explanation they had. Today, for many of us, the best explanation we seem to have is the soul for the essence of who an individual is. And I think in the same way that we've just kind of, why did we, if you will, do away with the sun God theory? Because the physical theory of the sun allows so much more. You can build solar cells, you can send satellites into orbit, etc. So again, in the same way that that we've seen that the physical explanation of the sun, just most of us I don't think can really contemplate the supernatural view of it anymore. So too shall it be some point in the future where, why did they used to think of the essence of who we are as this supernatural entity? So I find it useful to empathize, to understand exactly why they believe what they believe, and then figure out where can we assess, well, is this a good assumption here, and so on. So I'd say empathy mostly just to understand the other side.
Go ahead, sir. He's been waiting.
I would agree with about 95% of what was in the film.
Okay.
I would make a suggestion, and I'm speaking as a research scientist, 47 years in mental health publications, retired assistant professor of psychiatry. It would be good to add a couple of sentences that would also include the scientific method can also be a belief. And I think to stay away from hubris, it would be good if you could just add a couple sentences in the film that have to do with, and we as scientists also have to be aware of our own belief system.
Right.
I think that would help a lot to tone down what people might experience as talking from above.
You know what, I agree with you. I think that that's probably one of the things that I've learned in, my education through ASU. A lot of the time, science is looked at as, okay, it's the authority, right? And what people are starting to realize is that there's bias that exists, even with scientists. And the best part about science, though, and what I think using the scientific method is that you can double check yourself. So even if you are holding a specific bias and you conduct the experiment and you become published and you go through that entire process, if it turns out that you're wrong and somebody else can prove that you're wrong and do it better, that's the best part about it. So I totally agree with you, and you're absolutely right in regards to putting that, or at least discussing that. Not sure, though, that it really actually fits with the film per se, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, it felt a little offensive to me, and I'm speaking as a research scientist.
Got it.
Publications, that it comes across a little bit of, we know more than you do, and we need to educate you. So I think just a couple sentences that would...
To humanize it more? Is that...
Well, it's not that people know more. What it is a process, and it's our best understanding of how we know to know truth. Like if I make a claim about reality, there's got to be a way to test that. Carl Sagan talked about the dragon in the room. If I made a claim that there was an invisible dragon in my garage, for example, right? There has to be a process to how do I determine if that's truth. Science is the best process. It doesn't mean it can't be abused. I mean, we have nuclear weapons, right? But so we have cognitive biases, which they talk about. The good thing, though, is say I do research and I have a cognitive bias. All of you could do the same research and say, well, Ben, I didn't come up with the same conclusion. In fact, you guys could all come up with something totally different than me and prove me wrong. Science is open to that. And science is open to change, and that's the difference between science and belief systems. Science isn't a belief system, it's a process. We have cognitive biases. What we check against is those cognitive biases. And if you're a good researcher and a good scientist, that's what you do in research, is protect against those cognitive biases.
I think that's what he's trying to say, is that as a researcher himself, and and I don't want to speak for you, I'm just kind of going off of what you just said, is that he just wants, I think, us to make the point that scientists can be just as fallible.
Yeah.
And then that helps people to maybe relate a little bit more. I think that's all he's really trying to say.
Which is even worse to me. Yeah, it's even worse that when science abuses it, that's even worse.
Take advantage of lay people, I think it's terrible. And I think that's definitely one of the things that I would love to fight against.
The hand in the back was up for a while here. Yeah.
I love the comment, well, at least where I thought he was going was, teach us how to have these arguments, these debates or these conversations with our friends that are now ruining a lot of friendships.
Yeah.
It's bizarre. I've never seen it like this ever.
Yeah.
That concept of entrenchment, I used to have to deal with that with my mom. If I said, no, that's wrong, she would get in deeper.
Yeah.
And I really want to learn that. Is there a technical, psychological term for that that I can look up to learn more about why people get more entrenched when you kind of threaten their
Yes.
system?
Yeah, absolutely, there is. It's called the backfire effect. And there has been numerous studies regarding this, and I'm sure you can speak to it just as much as I can, in regards to what happens when you counter someone who has an opposing viewpoint. And like Caleb said, if you just come out and say, nope, you're all wrong, and I'm right, and it automatically, it just shuts everyone down. But when you can speak to them in a more empathetic way, like he was talking about, when you can say, you know what, that's really interesting, and I kind of understand why you feel that way. Have you ever looked at it a different way? I don't know, do you want to speak to that a little bit more?
Maybe just to say, just from my own experience, I've learned, I haven't learned to do it well, but I'm learning to be okay with being wrong.
Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely. Yeah.
I know it's all obvious to us, but boy, I'm continually struck how often in my own self I'm finding if somebody's disagreeing, I'm getting that autonomic nervous system response.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, wait, because if you're right, then that means I'm wrong, and that can't be right. And so I don't know, that's what I'm certainly just personally going to keep working on, and I'm hoping that keeps the others at a closer distance than otherwise would.
Absolutely.
What are your future plans?
Sleep.
No. Well, actually, our future plans for the film, we're going to try to get it into as many universities as possible. We want to tour with it. We've been in contact with a couple of the other gentlemen that are in the film. We're trying to get them, such as Caleb or Michael or even Peter, to come to Q&As just like Chad has come to, so that we can continue facilitating these conversations. Yes. Yeah. We're going to keep doing... eventually release it online to different platforms after we're done traveling with it, different film festivals, things like that, looking for self-distribution basically.
Can I
Yeah, absolutely.
propose a future direction?
Yes.
I think we're in a good spot here to disseminate data
Yeah.
in a popularly digestible way. And we're certainly, one thing I've noticed with word about immigrants coming across the borders, well what's the evidence? There's not a lot of good research, but the research I found is that actually you're much less likely to commit a crime if you've immigrated to this country than otherwise. Well, that's great data. That's that I can actually use that, and you can't. The beautiful thing about data, as long as it's collected properly, you can't argue with it. It is what it is. So we get that fundamental. So I think I'd love to see you guys go in that direction. I think we should work together in that way to really try and get data out there in a way that applies to the problems that we're all losing friends over in our arguments and so forth.
Absolutely.
Timing's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a website for contact data?
We have a website, reasonstobelievefilm.com. And that's going to be all the films like where we're screening and all the stuff there. But anything that's going to be updated, reasonstobelievefilm.com.
All right, thank you to Ben, Mesa, Chad for being here. Round of applause.
Thank you guys so much for being here. We really do appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you for having us. We really
Thank
appreciate
you
it.
for coming. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks a lot.